Welcome back. In this session, we're going to be talking about how to transition well. One of the models used for transitioning is called R.A.F.T, or Building Your R.A.F.T. It's an acronym, and R stands for reconciliation, A for affirmation, F for farewell, and T for think ahead. And so building your R.A.F.T can help you and your family and the TCKs that you care about and love transition well. And transitioning well can mean that they arrive at the next location well and are able to settle in well. And so transition is really key to the entire journey. And we're going to dig in a little bit deeper and talk about each of the letters in building your R.A.F.T. But while there are some preferred methods and maybe best practices for how to do this, I want you to know you can use whatever you have, whatever time or resources, and just do the best you can with it. So back in 2015, we had been on the field for about 4 years at that point in Central America, and had just moved from Guatemala to Honduras, been through a lot of transition once again. This was the longest time frame we knew beforehand that we were going to be transitioning. We had about a year. Other moves, we had about a 3-month notice we were going to be transitioning, and once we had a 3-week notice that we were going to be transitioning. Ideally, you're going to want about 3 to 4 months to build your R.A.F.T and transition well. You can do it with less. In that 3-week period, I believe we built our R.A.F.T and we did it as best we could, but we did pretty well because we were very intentional about building our R.A.F.T. But 3 weeks is not ideal. It's doable, but it's not ideal, and it's gonna feel very rushed. Things are gonna be crammed together. And so making sure you're planning ahead when you know you're gonna be transitioning, to give yourself that 3 to 4 month period where you can begin to very intentionally and methodically build your R.A.F.T. That's gonna really set you up for success. So, how do you build your R.A.F.T? Well, R, like I said, stands for reconciliation. So the very first step is for you and your TCKs, your family, to begin looking at, is there anyone in my life that I care about that I'm not doing well with right now? And so if there is, if it's a friend, an aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a team member, somebody, a principal or a schoolmate, somebody, there's conflict in that relationship and it's just not at a very good place. If that's the case, then R stands for reconciliation, and you're looking for what needs to be reconciled in any relationship that you have at that current location. So you take time to process this yourself, but you can take time to help your TCK process through it. Maybe they already know some relationships that need to be repaired. Maybe you know because they've been talking about it, or you've paid attention enough to see that some of the relationships were suffering. And so taking the time to walk them through the process of and the physical aspects of actually repairing those relationships, if at all possible. You know, as much as you can to bring reconciliation. Sometimes you can only do your part and your kids can only do their part. But if you can do your part, at least you can leave at peace knowing you did what you could. So A, affirmation. This is affirming the relationships that you do have. And so you're going to have your TCK go to their best friends, maybe there's a couple adult relationships that you've been helping to cultivate in their lives. Team members, anybody that they care about and that cares about them, if you can begin to affirm those relationships. And specifically, this can look like making cards, building gifts, making gifts, creating a little video or a book, something that they can give to these very valuable relationships. Of course, start with the ones that are most important. And of course, as time allows, do what they can to make sure that they're affirming the relationships that they have, starting with the most important relationships in their life. And this will be really, really beneficial and healthy for preparing them to move on into this next phase of life and through this transition they're about to embark on. So F stands for farewell. And it's really important for them to get to begin to say their goodbyes. You know, we as adults might think about this very differently than children. But I remember my son Makai, he was about 4 at the time, and we were getting ready to leave, and we were preparing him for this. And we asked him, you know, where are your favorite places? We knew a lot of this, but we wanted to hear from him as well. So you can ask lots of questions to make sure you're fully understanding their perspective and the way that they view their community and the place where they live. And ask, you know, who do you want to say goodbye to? What do you want to say goodbye to? For our kids, it was a tree. It was friends. It was their favorite restaurants. It was their favorite park or amusement park. The farewells might look different than you think they will, but making sure that your TCK gets to examine their own mind and heart as to what's important to them and get a chance to say goodbye. And so then one by one, you intentionally go to each of those favorite locations and you make sure that they get a chance to say goodbye. And for our kids, it would look like, you know, walking to that tree that we would sit under. And, you know, at the end, they would literally say, "Goodbye, tree." It's pretty simple, but it's very powerful. And the chance to get to say goodbye to the things that they love and care about and have grown accustomed to really sets them up for success in transitioning to the next phase of their life. So T stands for think ahead. And now that we have reconciled and affirmed and said our farewells, it's time to begin to think ahead to the future. And so this is where you begin to look up pictures of the place you're going to be moving. Look up landmarks. Find out fun facts about the culture, the language, the setting, and begin to prepare them and build excitement within your children for this transition. Now, you don't want to do T before you've done R, A, and F. In some cases, there might be some exceptions to that, but normally you want to make sure you do R.A.F. well before you start on T. And one of the major problems that we see so often is that people start with T. So, oh, don't worry, you're going to love where we're going. You're going to love China. You're going to love Russia. You're going to love Korea. You're going to love Japan. Sometimes it's easy to jump ahead to the think ahead and to begin thinking about what we're going to love about the next place and trying to tell our children it's going to be okay because they're going to enjoy this next thing. But actually that can be very detrimental and harmful. And what you really want to do is make sure that they've reconciled, affirmed the relationships that they had, and said their farewells well. And that will help them with the grieving process of grieving what they're losing and beginning to process that well. And that sets them up to be able to begin to enjoy thinking about the future. If you think about it in the context of a spouse, if you were to lose your spouse, you wouldn't want someone to be talking about, oh, don't worry, you'll get another spouse and they'll be even better. Nobody who loves their spouse would want to hear that after the passing of their spouse. And in the same way, children don't want to hear about how great the next place is going to be until they've had time to process and grieve what they're losing. And so take time to build your raft and R.A.F. before you get to T. Once you get to T, though, it's fun to go ahead and enjoy thinking ahead about the future, how things could be, dreaming, planning with your kids, making plans to visit places that you would like to see, people that you would like to see or meet. One of the really important things in transitioning well is knowing what to take and what to leave behind. And as parents, we can think very practically about this. And we do. We know our budget. We know how many suitcases we can take. We know what can go, what can't go, what will work or won't work where we're going. And so some of these things are rather practical things. But as much as we possibly can, it's really important to allow our children to help choose what they're going to bring and what they're going to leave behind and how they're going to leave those things behind. So what do I mean? Well, our son Makai, when we were preparing preparing him for moving back to the States, we said, hey, you get one suitcase and you can put whatever you want in this suitcase. Sarah and I had already packed another suitcase with all the essentials and everything that we knew he needed, like his clothes and things like that. And so in his other suitcase, he got to choose what he wanted to take. And he had some, toys that he just loved. He had a lot of stuffed animals that he really cared about. But we were shocked. The very first thing he put into his suitcase was his jar of rocks. And practically speaking, we're thinking, rocks? Of all things, rocks? It's going to be super heavy and take up a lot of his weight, and begin thinking about all the reasons why it's a bad idea. But we had told him that he got to choose what he wanted to take, and so we let him put his rocks into his suitcase. He brought some of his toys, not necessarily his most expensive toys or the ones that we would have brought, but the ones that meant the most to him. He brought some of his stuffed animals, the ones that had a lot of meaning to him. And going back to the rocks, I think it's really important to note there are very specific reasons that your children would choose the things that they choose. And it might not make sense to you, but it's very important to them. So with Makai, his rocks, when we asked them questions, we found out that each one of those rocks he had collected at a specific place. So it wasn't just a jar of rocks, it was a jar of memories. And that jar of memories represented all of the wonderful places that he'd been to and loved and could pick up that rock and remember and think of. And so that little jar of rocks was a treasure trove for him to be able to take his memories with him. And it's been 6 years and he still has that jar of rocks. And so now Sarah and I are really glad we didn't pick and choose the most expensive toys or the certain things that we would have wanted him to bring. We're really, really happy we let him choose what was important to him. And it's not about letting the child do what they want. It's about setting them up for success. So think about it this way. We all have things that comfort us and help calm us down, bring peace to us. And your child knows what those things are for him. Maybe you know what they are for your child as well. But when a child chooses to put things in his suitcase or her suitcase that are going to bring them peace and joy and comfort, then they're setting themselves up for success at the next location that they go to. And if they know they only get to put certain things in their suitcase, chances are they're going to choose the things that are most meaningful and important to them. So as we built our raft in preparation for moving from Honduras back to the States, there was many things we did, including having a farewell party for Makai, where he got to invite all of his friends, the people that were important to him. And we let those people know ahead of time it was probably going to be the last time they would see Makai. And then we collected notes and farewell letters from the people that showed up to say goodbye to him. And we ended up building a photo book full of the little notes and letters written to Makai from all of his friends and all the people he cared about and that cared about him. And he still has that book and looks at it today, 6 years later. So I hope this video has helped you learn how to build your raft. R, reconciliation, A, affirmation, F, farewell, and T, think ahead. And remember, it's important to reconcile, affirm, and say your farewells before you begin focusing on having your TCK think ahead to the future. Another thing to note is that there are other models for transitioning well. My friend Michael Pollack has come up with a new method he calls LEAP. And so you can get online and do your research, find a method that works well for you. But building a raft has worked really well for my family and I hope that it works well for you. That concludes this session. In our next session, we'll be talking about how to live as a family on the field.